you're going to experience some type of danger, some type of involuntary gasp reflex. So you want to prepare for those situations. First of all, it's not if you're going to go in, it's when. Just like a motorcycle, it's going to happen. Doesn't matter whether you have 1 year experience or 10 years of experience. I just had a friend of mine on my podcast that last year in October, he had been in his Jackson Big Rig, which is a very wide kayak. He had been in it for about 8 years. He was out duck hunting, reached over, made a mistake, flipped over, went in the water. If it wasn't for his friend actually being there to save him and to get him back to shore, he might not have been here today. That's episode 10 on the Lake Erie Kayak Anglers podcast. You can go back and check out that story. But the point I want to make is this is a guy that's in one of the widest kayaks on the market with 8 years of experience that ended up finding himself in that situation. So first and foremost, you always want to dress for the swim. So what happens basically when you go in that cold water, the first thing that's going to happen is an involuntary gasp reflex. And your body is naturally just going to gasp. What happens if you're underneath that water, you're going to suck in water and you're going to drown. If you're not wearing a PFD, you're going to sink to the bottom of the lake. So if you get past that initial gasp reflex, now you're going to go through your maximum intensity cold shock, which basically is 2 to 10 minutes of gasping for air and just hyperventilating, trying to catch your breath. Once you get your breath under control, then you can actually try to get back in your kayak. Now there's another hidden danger that's going on in that process. When you hit that cold water, your blood is rushing to your inner core, and it's creating a very high and instantaneous spike in your blood pressure, which is also going to give you some heart issues, maybe a potential heart attack or something like that. On top of that, once you get through all of that, now you're in the water, say 5 to 10 minutes. Your body is already starting to lose the ability to move. You're starting to lose your dexterity. And what happens is when you try to get back in your kayak, you realize you're not going to get back in. For a number of reasons. The cold water is starting to kick in, your hypothermia is starting to kick in. And the other reason, probably the most common reason, is because you didn't practice ever. So now you're in a situation, your kayak's upside down, you're in the water, and you're like, oh crap, what do I do now? Well, the first thing that should go through your head is, well, I should have practiced before, because if I would have practiced before, I'd know exactly what to do in that dangerous situation. With that being said, we're going to have Jeff show us some techniques, some re-entry techniques, and some ways just to get back in and practice for when you do go in. So, yeah. So after you get through, the most common thing that people think about when it comes to cold water is hypothermia. Well, that's probably the least common danger. All the other things that I talked about before, the involuntary gasp reflex, your maximum intensity cold shock, that spike in the blood pressure, those are immediate dangers. Once you get through those, then you have that hypothermia situation that you have to deal with. And if you're still in the water because you just fought off that maximum intensity cold shock, it's even more dangerous. So what Jeff's going to do is Jeff wants to talk about the signs to identify that, because it's not only getting in the water, you can get hypothermia when you're outside of the water. You're on the top of your kayak, you're out there, and maybe the rain comes in, or the wind kicks up and now you have a lot of waves coming over your boat, which is getting you wet. So now you're getting wet, you have the wind blowing, your body temperature's coming down. If you're spending 6, 7, 8 hours on the water, you want to be able to identify the signs of hypothermia. So if your buddy or Jeff's over there and he's starting to experience it, you can say, hey man, are you doing okay? I feel like you're in danger. So we want to, Jeff's going to just talk about some of those signs to look for.
I'm making Hannah very nervous walking in with the microphone. Look at her, she's mad. I won't submerge it, I promise. So the signs and symptoms of hypothermia I refer to as the umbles. You mumble, stumble, fumble, and grumble. In other words, you resemble an angry drunk. Very appropriate analogy here for St. Patrick's Day, right? So I've been there with hypothermia and experienced those symptoms. It was one of the two times, in my kayak fishing career where I thought, hey, it's been a good run. I'm gonna die now because I can't get things done that I need to get done. In that situation, I was on a week-long camping float trip on the upper Potomac River, the border between there was West Virginia and Maryland. But we were camping, and we had been in the water all day, and we had done, we had covered, I think that whole trip we did 67 and a half miles in about 6.5 days. But it was somewhere in the middle, and the tent leaked, and our sleeping bags were soaked, and we were out of the kayaks, but we had been up all night trying to start a fire, and were totally unsuccessful. And we went to bed, and I woke up. Actually, I never really went to bed, but around 2:45 a.m., my buddy and I said, we have to start a fire. And in the winter, when I go kayak fishing in the winter, I carry a dry bag that has all sorts of different methods to get dry clothing on myself, but also to be able to start a fire fast. And the precursor to all that is wearing the dry suit. You have to have the dry suit, and obviously the life jacket is mandatory. But I exhibited those symptoms of mumble. My speech was slurred. And you will actually, if you're hypothermic, you'll try to say something and different words will come out of your mouth. It's like, and you listen to yourself, you're like, that's not what I meant to say. So it's more than slurring your speech. You do mumble, your brain to mouth communication just fails. Like, you can't communicate well. So mumble, stumble. We were walking around trying to find dry wood to shave, to get down to, use a knife and get down to dry wood. But we're walking around and we're tripping over roots and falling down on our face. So mumble, stumble, fumble, holding the knife. Your hand can't. I mean, Chuck, you talked about loss of dexterity. We couldn't hold the knife without dropping it constantly. So that's the fumble. And then the grumble, we were just irritable. And that's being, that's the angry drunk part of it. So if you recognize either, and you probably won't recognize it in yourself, you're going to recognize it in other people who you're out on the water with, whether you're kayak fishing or sea kayaking or whatever you do that's a water sport in cold weather, whitewater, whatever it is. Recognize it in your friend and hold them accountable and say, you're done. And I actually have my buddy Juan Verut, who's a kayak fishing guide, like Chuck is. Chuck's a kayak fishing guide here on Lake Erie. My buddy Juan did it in central Pennsylvania on the Susquehanna River, and he and I would go kayak fishing in snowstorms all the time. Like, it's just, we enjoy it, it's fun, but we give ourselves the permission to say, I'm calling it, you just said some stuff that doesn't make sense, or I'm calling it, you did whatever it is that I'm recognizing hypothermia. So recognizing signs and symptoms of hypothermia is critical, and going with a buddy who can see it in you and say, pull in your card, we're out. All right, coming back to you, Chuck.
All right. So now you understand the dangers of hypothermia. Now we're going to get into the safety clothes. The safety gear that you can use. Obviously, Jeff and I are in dry suits. I'm in a Kokatat dry suit. I'm not sponsored by any dry suit company. The key is, don't go out on Amazon, buy one that's $100 less that you've never heard of. At the end of the day, if your dry suit fails, you're probably going to die. So spend a little bit extra money, go with the reputable brand, NRS, Kokatat, Mustang, something that is actually going to do the job that it's designed for, and it's not just some, fly-by-night Amazon company that's just pushing product out, and when something happens, they're not going to be there. So invest in, something reliable. Some people go out in wetsuits. Wetsuits are great, I believe, down to about 45 degrees. You can go colder, you're just going to have to go thicker. the biggest thing to realize with that is now you're going thicker, well now your movement's less. So you have a thick, 8 mil, 10 mil wetsuit on, and your movement is a lot less. So your paddling's a lot less, your netting's a lot less, maybe getting back into kayak is a lot harder. So that's why, like, at least for kayak fishing and what we're doing, the dry suits just seem to do the job. The other aspect is, a wetsuit is designed to work wet. So unless you have that layer of water in there, it's not going to work properly. Basically what happens is the water gets inside your wetsuit and it warms up from your body. And that stops any other water from coming in. That cold water tries to come in, the hot water says, nope, we're all full in here. So that's how you stay warm with a wetsuit, aside from the blubber factor. With the dry suit, you don't have to ever worry about that water coming in. Now, if you do, like, for example, third trip out with this suit years back, I fished all day. I was out on Lake Erie for, 10 hours or so. Got out of my kayak, started walking, and boom, there went a treble hook right through my brand new dry suit. So I'm like, well, I did the right thing. I just put a hole in my dry suit, which is gonna let water in, right? So it was at the end of the trip. I went home, I used Aqua Seal, sealed it up, took care of that problem, and I was ready to go. With that being said, something like that is something that you should carry, like Aqua Seal or like the Gearade Type A, I believe it is. Terrade Type A. Because you're gonna have those situations where you might need to make a patch. And you might need to make it now on the water and, prevent the water from coming in. So, now when it comes to dry suits, there's two different kinds. You're gonna hear two terms, your semi-dry suit and your regular dry suit. Me personally, I'm in a semi-dry suit. If you've seen any of my videos, all the cold water videos, I'm swimming in the semi-dry suit that Kokatat makes. The thing that makes a semi-dry suit is your neoprene neck gasket. So it's a neoprene cinch down neck. Might let a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons of water in, but not enough to get in any danger for me. But I do have the latex wrist gaskets. So no water's coming in over here. Now on the flip side, Jeff's suit is actually a full dry suit. It has your latex neck gasket up here, which might not be as important for a kayak angler, but anybody that's in like sea kayaks or whitewater kayaks, they're going in the water a lot. They might have a waterfall coming down on them. They really need that real tight seal around the neck that the latex will do. The flip side, some people are allergic to latex, and some people don't like to be strangled all day. So that's where the neoprene neck gasket comes in. The other factor, you have your PFD on, it's keeping you above the water, and if you have the proper underlayers, even if you get a trickle or two down your back, it's not going to put you in any dangerous situation. So on top of the dry suit or the semi-dry suit, whatever you try, you're going to have some kind of boots. Obviously these are the NRS boundary boots. I believe they're, 5 millimeters or 3 millimeters? They're 3 millimeters thick. Keep my feet warm and they keep my booties protected. Gloves are always very important. Now with an angler, you're constantly taking your gloves off. So I generally don't wear gloves except for when I'm trying to warm up my hands. So I just use a regular pair of winter gloves with hand warmers in there. So I deal with the fish, 10 minutes later my hands are ice cubes. I stick them in the gloves, I get them warm real quick, pull them back out, I can shoot video, set my lines, do whatever I need to do. The more important part is actually like a neoprene bar club or a hood. Because even with your dry suit, even with your gloves on, your boots, when you hit that water, your central nervous system is hitting that cold water. And if you go to my YouTube channel and you look at the video where I'm jumping into icy water, you'll notice I step out of the water and I'm trying to get my bearings together because that ice hit my head, or not the ice, but the cold water hit my head, and my brain's like, whoa, what's going on? Now, the thing to realize, obviously, I have a dry suit, I'm in a good situation, I'm not dangerous, but it took a minute to shake that off. What that tells you is you always want to have a neoprene neck gasket or a neoprene balaclava, because you don't want to get in that situation where you might need that minute or two to think. Perfect example, a buddy of mine, Moulton Avery from the National Center for Cold Water Safety. I brought his wife on the podcast, do a roundtable for ladies wanting to do cold water, and one of the things that she had brought up was she was learning, they practice how to roll every time they go out, and she got out there, she didn't have her hood on or anything like that, she got out there, she rolled over and she popped out of the boat. And her husband's like, what happened? She's like, I don't know. Well, you know what happened? Her head hit that cold water, she temporarily lost her focus, and she let go of her boat. So that's something you want to consider when you're out there. You know, it's definitely not something that a lot of people talk about, but it's something that can put you into a situation where, you know, you might need that time back.